Hi, I'm Hutton, and this is how I encountered Jesus. I didn't grow up in the church and had never had really inclination as to what church life was about, had never read the Bible or anything like that. And I was on my first deployment in the Middle East, and this was in 2004. And we were in Iraq. And our job at the time was singular in focus, and it was just to kick in doors of the bad guys and find them. And this was on April 28th of that year. And we had gotten a mission briefing first thing in the morning, like we did every week. And we went through our rehearsals that morning, and we started to, just kind of go through the tempo of the day. Nothing felt extraordinary or out of place. As we progressed through that day, the way these raids work is they always happen at around 2, 3 in the morning. So you have this lull period after dinner where everyone just kind of goes into their own headspace and either reads books or watches movies or just kind of hangs out as a group. And we went through that whole tempo again that day, and nothing was out of the ordinary. It was at about 1 o'clock. 1 o'clock in the morning, we started to get ready. Everyone was starting to get their equipment put together and check their night vision and make sure everything was working. And we went through a couple more dry runs of the rehearsals just to make sure everyone was feeling primed for this night's raid. We hop in the Humvees and we start heading down what was called Baghdad Road. At the time we were in Kirkuk, Iraq is where we were, and we head down Baghdad Road, and it's called under blackout, which means there's no lights on the Humvees, there's nothing nothing that people can see us with effectively. And we pull up to the house that we were going to raid. And for whatever reason, we had done a lot of these, and I was our team's number one man because I'm small, kind of short in stature. And I had told our breacher that day on the way actually to the raid that I wanted to try to kick in the door myself. I was feeling confident that it was a good time to give it a try. And he just kind of chuckled and said, "Yeah, that's fine." So we get up to the house. And it's totally dark, and we get up to the front door of the house, and even under night vision, like when it's that dark, it can be hard to pick out shadows or pick things out like that. And everyone's in line, everyone's ready to go into the house, and I go up to the front door, and mind you, these are metal doors in concrete houses. And I go up and I kick. And nothing happens except for a really loud noise down the hall. And I briefly look at the rest of the guys that were getting ready to go in with me, and I look, and the number 2 man who was going to come in right behind me just kind of goes, "Do it again." And so I go up to kick it a second time. And just as I kick it, I can see this kind of figure down the hall, and I hear it talk. And the next thing I know is I feel this crazy pressure in my left ear. And that was the first bullet that came out the door. And it had actually come so close to my head that it ruptured my left eardrum. The rest of it to me is a little bit of a blur. But the guys on my team said that I was literally just thrown out of the way, like in a way that wasn't a human movement. We had been in quite a few firefights up to this point, so we knew how people move and how, kind of the tempo, if you will. And they just kept coming back to this after the fact, like it wasn't real, like a body doesn't move that way. Well, as I was thrown out of the way, 5 more bullets came out the door. And I had fallen on the ground and kind of came to as to what was going on. And we make it in the house. Long story short, we end up capturing the guy that we were there for. And on the way out of the house, my team leader stops me and he grabs me and he's like, Hutton, look at this. And he shows me where I was standing. And there were 6 bullet holes right where I was. And the idea that I was standing there without a scratch on my body was so hard for me to comprehend that I didn't try. I just kind of shrugged it off and said, wow, that was close. And tried to put it out of my mind because it was so different. I couldn't process it. A couple weeks later, we were doing another raid, and we had finished that raid. And we were actually waiting for a unit that was going to come and basically long-term secure the building that we had taken over. As we were waiting there, when you're in combat, like any chance you get to sleep, you do. You want to just try to fall asleep. And I had, probably about 15, 20 minutes that we knew we weren't going to be doing anything. So I laid down and just kind of took my my vest off and just tried to get some sleep. And as I was drifting off into sleep, I had the most powerful vision I've ever had in my life. And it's still, to this day, it gives me goosebumps because it was as if it was yesterday. And it was it was a room, like an apartment room. And my dad was sitting on the bed with his back to me, and my aunt was sitting on the bed with her back to me as well. And both of their heads down, or both of their heads were down, and they were crying. And out of the right-hand side of this room comes this just beautiful, beautiful white light. And having not grown up in the church, having not, read the Bible, still at that age, I was around, I think, like 24. What Jesus looks like. And it was Jesus. And he walks up to them and he puts his hands on their shoulders. And he says, it's okay. He's safe. He's with me. And I was horrified of that. I actually thought, the first thing that came to my mind was, oh my gosh, I'm going to die. Jesus is showing me that I'm going to die. And I ran as far away from that as possible. So now Jesus had hit me twice, right? So first interaction was a few weeks prior, throwing me out of the way of those bullets. And then he comes to me in that vision. So I ran and really, lived a life with no religion whatsoever. Lived a life that, was as ungodly, really, as you can be. And I was even exploring other religions like Buddhism. All of it trying to find peace. And a lot of it was surrounding that vision. And was trying to just get as far away as possible. There was one night when I was dating my now wife that her and I and her brother had gone on a night hike. And we had gotten up to the top of this little mountain that we were climbing. And we were just sitting up there kind of drinking it in, looking out at the city. And my wife and her family, they grew up in the church. And just whatever was going on that night, the conversation shifted to God, and shifted to the church. And I hadn't mentioned this vision or actually, any of that to anyone since it took place back in Iraq. And I just felt called to bring it up. And so I shared this story with my now wife and with her brother. And their first response was, that's amazing. Jesus was telling you that he's with you. There's nothing to be scared of. I didn't believe it. I still didn't believe it. And it was, obviously my inability to comprehend who Jesus was. And so life happens, we get married, and we had a pretty tumultuous first half of our marriage. And there was no God in our marriage, at least on my end. I think my wife's, she had stepped away from the church, but she still was very deep rooted in her faith. We were sitting around in Austin, Texas, at the time is where we lived. And this was now fast forward to the summer of 2020. And my wife is born and raised in Washington, and a lot like other families, we were trying to figure out where do we want to go next. And we decided to move to Washington. And so we packed up the family and we moved to Washington. When we got here, the housing market was just crazy, as everyone knows. And we decided to rent a townhome and try to find a place to live, right? To just take our time to try to enter into the housing market. We had been up here about 6 months, and we're just getting discouraged because there was nothing that, one, resembled what we had in Texas, two, even felt remotely worth the value. And we had gotten back from looking at a piece of property. And, Mercedes, she was on the verge of tears at that point because we were starting to even question, what are we doing here? And so she tells me, Ty, send me some Zillow links and we'll just, maybe we just got to buy a house. Maybe we just got to, whatever house it is, we just got to do it and, just say that's good. So I send her some links and she's looking at them and getting more discouraged. And there's this one house on the right-hand side of the feed, and she just feels this pull to click on it. And just from the sticker price of it, it was not in our price range that we had been looking at all. And aesthetically was not something that really matched our personalities. But she clicks on it, and we start going through the pictures. And she just feels this pull, like, we're going to go see this house. So she reaches out to the agent and asks, to set up a time. And the agent was very candid, like, hey, we're showing for one weekend, taking offers, and then that's it. So you guys will have to come tomorrow, which would be Sunday. And we said, sure, we'll be there. And we get up to that house, and there's a lot of people in it. And we were a little early. We just wanted to see the neighborhood. And we come into the house, and right away, a real estate agent is like, hey, it's not your guys' time to be in here. And she was showing a large group, and we were like, man, what are we even doing? Like, this is such a waste of time. Well, anyways, our agent shows up, and everyone clears out, and we get an hour in the house, and we're walking around, and our boys were just in love with it. And Mercedes had talked to the agent, as we were going through the house, and Mercedes had mentioned blessed, that we're just blessed to even be up here around family and back in Washington. And the agent asked Mercedes if she was of faith, and Mercedes said that she was. And the agent then at that point, just really opened up and was like, okay, here's what it's going to take. Here's what it's going to take to get the house. Here's how it all needs to fall in line. So we got home and we made a letter, the who we are as the Huttons and kind of our story, and we submit that with our offer, fully knowing that there were actually offers above ours. There were offers in pure cash above ours. And Mercedes told the boys, she was like, okay, guys, if we're going to get this house, God wants us to have it. And so she said a prayer with the boys, a prayer that I did not participate in. I actually kind of chuckled and walked out of the room. And that night, we get the call back from the agent that, hey, the house is yours. Congratulations. So we go through the whirlwind of just packing and, packing up the townhome and saying, okay, like now we're going to move into this house that is just crazy, that again still makes no sense to us. And so we solicit Mercedes' family to help us on that move because we didn't want to pay for real estate agent or movers to do it. And so they all come and help us pack and help us move in. And the weekend that we're moving in, we're unpacking, kind of looking around at the neighborhood, and a couple people had stopped by and introduced themselves. And then all of a sudden our doorbell rings, and it's this younger girl, and she's holding cookies, and her name is Lydia. And so for those of you who go to the church, you'll know Lydia. And she, we welcome her in, and we're starting to figure out, like, well, who is this? And she tells us that she lives next door, that she's staying next door, and that, that she's living with the pastors of a church here in Mill Creek. And very cordial, and I remember, thank you for the cookies, Lydia. We're really excited to be part of this neighborhood. And my first comment to Mercedes after that was, great, we live next to pastors. Not in a positive way, but like, buzzkill. Well, as we're unpacking, Mercedes' dad is here. And again, they're very, very deep-rooted in faith and grew up in the church, and they're all intertwined there. And he's out on the driveway, and he sees this guy with tattoos on his legs and some up his arm, and they get to talking on the driveway, and it turns out it's Brandon. And in that conversation, Brandon mentions, I'm the pastor of this church, and Mercedes' dad, he comes in, he tells us, and he's excited about it. And, he says, okay, like, let's look him up online. And so he does, and he gets really excited finding out that Brandon went to Northwest, to Mercedes' family. That was a big deal. And so, we end up the first to appease him, to appease my father-in-law. Honestly, we stream the sermon, and it was Brandon speaking. And I remember walking around, unpacking boxes in the house, just saying, man, that guy's got a good stage presence. Like, I just liked the way that he was speaking on stage. And so we, finished unpacking, finished watching, and Mercedes, she's like, we should go check that out. So I was like, okay. The next weekend we step into Venture, and it was Mother's Day, and Di was preaching, and about 10 minutes in, and her whole passage the whole sermon that day was based on speaking life. And about 10 minutes in, I completely collapsed internally. And it wasn't an ounce of sadness. It was an ounce of complete joy. And a joy that I had never known I could find. And that was the moment that I was saved. And that was the moment that this story started to make sense. And that was the moment that changed my life. So after that, after being saved, I actually, there was about a 2-week period where I didn't say anything because I was embarrassed. It felt like it was this crazy thing that I still can't really explain. But we had gone back to church the following weekend, and then the following weekend as well. And we got home, and I told Mercedes, I said, look, I got to ask you something. And I started to explain what had happened on Mother's Day. And I asked her, and I said, look, like, don't think I'm some crazy Bible person. Like, I think, like, I was saved. And Mercedes smiles, and she's like, yes, like, that's what happened. And so I start to really just feel comfortable in that. And immediately, this urge to learn just, like, overwhelms me. And so I talked to Brandon, and he gives me, some guidance on where to start, because I still hadn't even read the Bible. And so I really start in the New Testament, and just throughout the summer I devour the New Testament. and just front, back, again. And supplement in listening to the Bama podcast on that, and just really trying to hear Jesus in the Gospels, which, mind you, I didn't even know what the Gospels were. I actually thought the Gospels were the Bible until I recognized they were Jesus' life. So I had an amazing summer in this new faith and walking this journey. And in September, out of nowhere, and I remembered it was 4:48 in the morning, I was awoken, and it was a Saturday, and I was awoken with the words, Amos, Amos, Amos. And I wake up, I'm like, okay, Amos, who's Amos? So I asked Mercedes, thinking like, do we know an Amos? That's just where my head went. Like, maybe I had a dream, like, do we know an Amos? Do you know an Amos? Like, is someone gonna get hurt? Like, and you know, she lets me know, like, no, Amos is in the Bible, prophet in the Bible, in the Old Testament. And so I just devour it. I'm like, okay, let's find out who Amos is. And so I read the message, and I read it again and again, and it's obvious, like, that message pertains to today, just like it did then. But it wasn't what the intent was of Amos. I wasn't feeling it. And I had prayed and really searching for the meaning on it. And then God laid on my heart to look at who Amos is. And, you know, to learn who he was. And Amos was a businessman who was called out of business and into being a prophet, into being in ministry. And when I realized that, my stomach just dropped. And I didn't know what to do or where to go. And I remember talking to Mercedes about it, and she's like, nah, that's crazy. Like, no way. And so I pray, and finally kind of talked to the pastoral staff, and ended, you know, getting to talk to Brandon about it. And it was clear that I'm being called into ministry by God, with the words Amos, Amos, Amos. And so my next journey, or my next step, I've enrolled into Northwest, into the ministry program, to get a master's in ministry, and we'll be starting in January.